Earlier on Tuesday, Cricket West Indies named a 15-man squad for the two-test tour of Zimbabwe, starting with a warm-up match on January 28. Shadon Gabriel and the Warrican will make their return to the Red Ball format, while seamer Jaden Seals is unavailable due to injury. This is the full squad. Craig Brathwaite, Jermaine Blackwood, Nkrumah Bonner, Ryan Chanderpaul, Roston Chase, Joshua De Silva, Shadon Gabriel, Jason Holder, Jamel Warrican, Devon Thomas, Keemar Roach, Raymond Reefer, Gudakesh Moti, Kyle Mears, and Alzari Joseph. In commenting on the squad assembled, this is what the lead selector, Desmond Haynes, said. We looked at the conditions we anticipate playing in and have included two left-arm spinners who didn't go to Australia in Moti and Warrican. With our fast bowlers, Seals has done extremely well for us since he started back in 2021. But with him unavailable, we have decided that Gabriel would be best able to fill that role. Gabriel, is an experienced bowler who has been at the international level for over 10 years and has knowledge of the conditions in Zimbabwe when we won there in 2017. Here to look at the squad assembled is Fazeer Mohammed. Good afternoon, Faz. Happy New Year. Is the first time we're talking to you since 2023 started?
Yes, I believe it is. All the best for the new year to you and all at SportsMax as well.
Excellent, sir. I take it on behalf of everybody, the good greeting. All right. So this 15-man selection, any complaints?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a complaint other than it's a reflection of the reality of the state of West Indies cricket, especially when we're talking about the first-class game, the longer game, the traditional game, that there aren't too many players banging down the door, certainly in the batting lineup to really challenge the incumbent, because again, as we've said before, even before the two test matches in Australia at the end of last year, the numbers are very ordinary, notwithstanding the resistance we saw in the first test match in Perth, and then we saw a defeat by 400 runs. So really, from my own limited perspective, I can't say that there are too many players who you would consider automatic selections in the batting lineup as against what we have available right now among those who have been selected. On the bowling side of things, here we have that discussion once again. What about Rakeem Cornwall? And again, you've brought back two left-arm spinners in Jamel Warrican and Gudakesh Moti. You've got in your team, of course, Roston Chase, who wasn't all that effective in those couple of test matches in Australia. Shannon Gabriel comes back, and there's always going to be a fitness question over Shannon Gabriel. You never question his ability to put in the effort, to put in the work once he's fit. But there's always a question mark as to his ability to last a test match, last a couple of test matches. So I think at the end of the day, it's a sort of selection that reflects the state of West Indies cricket and the state as to where we are in the rankings, especially when we're talking about test cricket.
Yeah, well, it's not really a selection issue per se, but he is selected, so I can pivot from him. The selection of Tagenarine Chanderpaul in this squad, of course, following from his introduction against Australia. A lot of faith reposed in him to give Craig Brathwaite that stable partner at the top of the innings, so that at least we can start the innings properly, the West Indies, when we bat. What do you expect from the young man on this tour?
Well, I would think that Tagenarine Chanderpaul, having survived that baptism of fire in Australia, should really tell himself that ahead of the test matches in South Africa, let's not forget that is to follow the two test matches in Zimbabwe, and we are yet to see if there'll be any changes in the squad for those test matches, which will be a very different sort of challenge. For someone like a Chanderpaul, for anyone, for example, in the West Indies batting lineup, but especially young Chanderpaul, he'll have to tell himself, this is the chance to cash in. No disrespect to the Zimbabwean bowlers, but the pitches in Bangladesh when the West Indies were last there in 2017, and Desmond Haynes, the chief selector, alluded to it, were pretty placid. And it is really about recognizing that here's your opportunity, having really come out creditably, very creditably, from that Australian experience, notwithstanding the West Indies' losses in the two test matches, to really now build on that. You wouldn't want to see someone like a Tagenarine Chanderpaul getting the 40-odd and the 30-odd and the 50-odd and then getting out. He has to tell himself, like his captain, this is an opportunity to cash in, to really put your anchor down, bat for a long period, and believe that here's an opportunity to get a test 100, to get the sort of runs under your belt that will provide greater confidence for the challenges that lie ahead in South Africa.
Right, Faz, and remember, Andre Coley, interim head coach, would have to be working with these this group of guys. Do you think it's a balanced team that he has at his disposal, bat and ball?
I think it is, again, within those obvious limitations of the numbers. When you look at the numbers, let's face it, Mariah, the numbers are very ordinary. Even allowing for Craig Brathwaite's battling 100 on the final day of the Perth Test match in the fourth innings, he averages 35. So let's own up to that reality. But again, because it's Zimbabwe, a team that has been treated very badly by world cricket and the ICC, and therefore a lot of their budding talents have never really had the opportunity to develop their skills. And yes, I know about the issues of financial mismanagement and corruption in Zimbabwean cricket, but the way they've been treated by the ICC and the world game reflects a willingness to just allow their cricket to die. But they have talented cricketers. And therefore, for Andre Coley, he has a challenge ahead of him. And again, no coach can change a squad overnight where you've got mediocre performances. Whether you're talking about a Phil Simmons, whether you're talking about an Andre Coley, whether you're talking about whoever's going to follow up as a full-time coach, whoever that might be. So that's a bigger issue facing West Indies cricket. But again, he's worked with these players quite extensively over a number of years. He's a quite methodical individual. He doesn't seem to be too perturbed by what people say about him, for or against, and he knows his own focus. But again, it's about putting things in perspective. And yes, he has a squad of players from those that are available, but I don't think you'd venture too far other than the obvious discussion about Rakeem Cornwall and the continuing in and out when it comes to spinners, because that remains an issue which, from my own, again, limited perspective, continues to hamper the development of quality spinners. Because you watch someone like a Nathan Lyon over 400 test wickets, he always plays, whatever the conditions, because he's grown into the job to the point where he's just indispensable. We don't give spinners that opportunity in West Indies test cricket.
Yeah, George, you want to take this?
Faz, I was looking, I was distracted by the averages. Our director has given us the averages on another screen here, and I was looking at them. And I want to ask you, well, we have a graphic. I hope you can see, Faz, of our test averages in 2022 for the batsmen. Of course, not all of these on this list are in the Zimbabwe touring party, but most of them are. Do you imagine that the Zimbabweans will read these numbers and be fearful of the West Indies as a batting lineup?
No, I don't think there's any reason for Zimbabwe to be fearful. I think they will look at this as an opportunity to just go one step further, because let's not forget that Zimbabwe have come close on a number of occasions to defeating the West Indies. Famously at Queen's Park Oval right here in Trinidad and Tobago, they needed just 100 to win, but was shot out for 65. Courtney Walsh, Curtly Ambrose, Franklin Rose, and so many others did the job some 23 years ago. In fact, the last time the West Indies were in Zimbabwe, in the second test match after the West Indies won comfortably, the West Indies were on the verge of succumbing in the second test match, with Sikandar Raza having a fantastic performance with the ball, but then was saved by some late order partnerships. So again, when you look at the situation with West Indies cricket, notwithstanding those numbers, and again, credit to Craig Brathwaite, because he was named in some international test 11s based on his performances in 2022. Chanderpaul averaging 40 after a couple of test matches. But once more, let's again put it in perspective. Remember, we had Kyle Mayers, we had Nkrumah Bonner, really outstanding 2 years earlier, and now we see them struggling.
Yes.
Are we going to see Chanderpaul build and move forward steadily and continuously rather than falling back? So to answer your specific question, I think Zimbabwe will see this batting and bowling as an opportunity.
So here's the thing now. I'm toying with whether to tell you the name of who said it, because I don't want people to interpret your honest comments as a broadside against the individual. So I'm going to leave his name out. But I got an email this morning from a prominent and seasoned to the bone cricket commentator in this part of the world, who was raising Cain about the selection of Nkrumah Bonner. So I know the gentleman is watching now. And in the office here, we brand Nkrumah Bonner as walking runs. That's what we call him in zone room. A bit cheeky in some respects, but he's known as walking runs. And the gentleman said in criticizing the selection of Bonner, said Bonner will effectively be a walking wicket on this tour of Southern Africa to include Zimbabwe and South Africa. And I wanted to pick you up on that. Do you think the Bonner selection is merited given his recent form?
It's merited for Zimbabwe, but not for South Africa. And I know where the walking wicket thing comes from. It's that vulnerability to fast bowling. And this is no secret. He might be walking runs on flat pitches and half decent bowling and so on, where the ball barely rises high. And this is not meant to be any scathing criticism. This is reality. The fact is that he's already been sorted out at the highest level, because from very early on, and again, at the risk of sounding depressingly repetitive, the very first ball that he faced in the series against South Africa in June of 2021, he was struck flush on the helmet, hooking at the fastest bowler in the world, Anrik Nokia, and then became a concussion substitute. He became a concussion substitute again in the last test series. So then there's an obvious question about his ability to cope with genuine fast bowling on helpful surfaces. I don't think you're going to get that in Zimbabwe. And therefore, in Zimbabwe, it might be much more in his zone. He might be a lot more comfortable in that environment. Will that give him the sort of confidence that can make a difference in South Africa? I fear not, based on what I've seen of him already.
So, Faz, what are you expecting from our Windies men? Let's just call it against Zimbabwe first.
I think it's going to be a close series. Again, because I suspect that Zimbabwe really wanted to show their worth, really want to respond to those who have treated them with real disregard, almost as they shouldn't be playing Test cricket. I would remind people that the West Indies have had a vested interest in the growth of Zimbabwean cricket, not South African cricket, Zimbabwean cricket since the late 1980s. And even the captain then in the mid-2000s, Brian Lara, said it was the responsibility of the West Indies to put Zimbabwe under their wing and help in their growth and development. Having said all of that, I expect the Zimbabweans to think that this is a fantastic opportunity, given the obvious vulnerabilities in West Indies cricket, to try to make some sort of statement, to say that, look, we may hold our own, we may lose narrowly, we may get beaten heavily, but don't discard us as you've been doing for so long. If I'm asked to make a prediction, I'll go with 1-1 in that series.
All right, Faz, I want to thank you so much for your input, and of course, we'll talk again soon.
Take care.
Fazeer Mohammed there, our international cricket commentator. George, are you ready?
Yeah. I like Faz. I don't know. The more I think about this series, the more I see 1-1.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Looking forward for some good performances with the bat. Let's take a look at the match schedule now. All right, so January 28th to 30, we have the 3-day warm-up match. Then in February, we have the first test at the Queen Sports Club, and it continues on the 12th to the 6th of February. This is the Windies tour from the 12th to the 16th of February, the West Indies tour of Zimbabwe.